Hi there, my name's Keith and welcome to Keith James Green's Bible Research. Over the last number of years, I've been reading a book entitled The Blind Watchmaker, and this book was written by Richard Dawkins, who's one of the most prolific exponents of the theory of evolution in the 20th century. And one of the fundamental ideas in the book is that all the complex biological systems that we see in nature today evolved from an original, simpler system, perhaps billions of years ago, by a long series of small, beneficial, random mutations. Each mutation adding a little bit of complexity to the original system and function. And he calls this supposed creative mechanism the blind watchmaker, and he puts forward the idea that it's got the power to assemble countless biological parts and make an original, simpler biological system into an ingenious, complicated system. And one example of this that he gives in his book is the human complex eye. And he puts forward the idea that the complex eye is a result of a long series of small random mutations that took place over billions of years that improved an original simpler type of eye, or not even an eye, what he calls a light sensitive spot that you can find today that exists in bacteria and plants. So that's his idea. He wasn't there to see it, but he imagines that there were perhaps billions or thousands or hundreds, who knows what he imagines. He seems to be able to imagine just about anything, but he imagines how it could have happened. The only trouble is that Dawkins and other scientists often talk about the supposed creative ability of the blind watchmaker as though it was a fact, when really it's only their belief, when really it's only their imagination. However, he goes to great lengths to try and make this plausible, to try and make it believable, because he knows when human beings normally look at a system that a complex system that other humans have made, they really don't entertain anything else other than the belief that it was intelligently designed and put together. So in his books, particularly in chapter 4, there's some really great stories, and as I said, he's got a really great imagination, but the question is it true? Did all the biological systems we see today, were they the result of a long series of random mutations that improved a simpler original system that supposedly exists billions of years ago? Because that's a basic Darwinian idea that has been around for about 100 years. Well, one scientist says no, and his name is Michael Behe. And Michael Behe is a biochemist and one of the leading proponents of what is known as the theory of intelligent design. And he wrote a book entitled Darwin's Black Box. And in that book, he claims that there's certain systems that he believes are way beyond the power of mutation and natural selection, or the power of this blind watchmaker to create from an original, simpler system that supposedly existed billions of years in the past. And he calls this type of system that he doesn't believe the watchmaker can make, he calls it an irreducibly complex system. And he defines what he means. By this he means, quote, a single system composed of several well-matched interacting parts that contribute to the basic function, wherein the removal of any one of these parts causes the system to effectively cease functioning. Now, in order to illustrate what he means, he draws our attention to a mousetrap. Now, mousetrap, he said, is an example of an irreducibly complex system, meaning that it basically consists of 5 parts, as you can see in the screen: the base, the catch, the hammer, the spring, and the holding bar. And if you were to take any one of these parts away, the mousetrap would not function in its ability to catch a mouse. All of these parts are necessary to exist at the same time in order for the system to actually exist. The system of catching a mouse. Take one part away, there's no function. And that's what he means by an irreducibly complex system. Now, in biology, he gives an example of an irreducibly complex biological system. And one example that it gives is that of a flagellum. Now, a flagellum is like a tiny swivel outboard motor that propels a bacteria through liquid in order to find its food. Now, basically, there are 3 essential parts. There's actually more than 3, but I'll just mention 3 essential parts that are necessary for a flagellum to function and propel a bacteria through liquid. It has to have a rotor, which, as you shown on your screen, consists of a shaft and also a circular disc down the bottom that rotate. It has to have a propeller, which is seen on your screen up the top, and it also has to have a complete motor combined with the rotor in order to spin the motor and in order to function. So take any one of these 3 parts away, take away the propeller, take away the rotor, or take away the engine, and the system will not function. There will be no system at all. And so that's what he means by an irreducibly complex system. Take away one of the parts, it loses function. Now, this really, according to Behe, this really presents a difficult problem for the Darwinian idea that complex systems developed as a result of the continuous improvement of a simpler system. Because in regards, logic has it that unless all the parts, say for example of the flagellum, existed together, take one of the parts away, there would be no function or no system to be improved. In other words, take any one of those parts away, there is no original functioning system that would be able to be improved because it wouldn't exist. So without all the parts, there's no original system to be improved. If it just had the propeller by itself, there's no system. It wouldn't be an improvement of a system, and the bacteria wouldn't function at all. Just having a pedal, it needs the engine and it needs the rotor, the shaft, and all those parts. Now, just as a side point, I just want you to have a look at another part of a flagellum called the clutch. Now, this clutch, what it's used for is to engage the propeller, to turn it on, to turn it off, basically. And it really looks like something that humans would make. In fact, it looks like a clutch in a car. So just looking at it, it really has an appearance of being intelligently designed rather than just assembled by some random process. Irreducibly complex systems cannot be explained by the conventional Darwinian idea that complicated biological systems evolved as a result of small improvements to an original simpler system. He therefore says that if evolutionists want to maintain their theory, they would then have to imagine, and they're actually pretty good at imagining, they would have to imagine an indirect path and explain how irreducibly complex systems were built. They would have to explain, for example, how a bacteria's outboard motor was built by adding parts that served other purposes. They'd have to explain that, and that's a lot more difficult. B, he says, the problem is compounded as more essential parts are discovered in an irreducibly complex system. Because as it turns out, there's not just 3 parts that are essential for a flagellum to function. There are actually 35 essential parts that are needed to exist together in order for the system to exist. Without any one of those parts, there's no system to be improved. So they would have to explain how 35 parts just happened by chance to eventually build an ingenious outboard motor while somehow being installed for other purposes. Now, to me, it really doesn't, it's not really that plausible and doesn't make a lot of sense. And any explanation they would put up would have to be, for me, a lot better than figments of their imagination of what they think happened billions of years ago. Otherwise, why should anyone believe it's true? What's the basis for believing that it's actually true? And the reason I say this, because as Behe indicates in his book, the improbability of such systems being built indirectly as a result of random mutation and natural selection, etc., begins to blow out. The probability blows out, and the idea therefore becomes increasingly implausible the more parts they find a complex, irreducibly complex system has. The idea becomes increasingly implausible and not very scientifically tenable. Behe put it this way: as the number of required parts increases, the difficulty of gradually putting the system together skyrockets, and the likelihood of an indirect scenarios plummets. Well, in layman terms, that basically sums up the ideas in Behe's book and what his book is all about. And so I hope you're a little more informed, and everyone's free to make up their own mind about this subject. But for me, I need more than wild speculation and imagination to believe that genius biological systems were built by a deaf, dumb, blind and brainless watchmaker. So until next time, goodbye from Keith James Green's Bible Research.